Well, here we are once again for another wonderful afternoon with the Andy Alberti show, and that's just my opinion. Anyway, welcome to the show. And today I have several things I want to talk about. I have with me a couple of documents that you may never have heard about. One is called the CEDS document, CEDS. C as in Charlie, E as in Edward, D as in damn, that's good. And that has to do with the economic development strategy for Nye County. What's that, you say? Well, technically, it's the plan that the county had, and this goes back to, I think, 2012, if I remember correctly. And we're going to talk a little about that. Also want to talk about what's going on in the GOP these days in Clark County. I never talk about Nye County's GOP because I'm still many friends there and I have no problem with what they do. Other than I'm not at the GOP meetings anymore. And then we're going to get into a little bit about water. I know I talk about water every week, but we have to talk about water every week. We drink it, we bathe in it. God knows we flush our toilets with it. We wash our cars, and we waste a lot of it. One day that may come home to roost. Okay, and then I want to talk about our privacy. So what did we talk about first? Oh, I know. Let's talk about Social Security. Now, as you know, Social Security, or let's say income tax. Let's start with that. In 1913, they passed the Income Tax Act. And at that time, there was a lot of discussion about people who were afraid that the tax would become onerous. And the maximum tax that could be charged, according to the law at that time, was 10% of your income. And people were afraid that it was going to be 10% no matter what, because that would be the limit. We know how people in government are. They think they're the boss. Okay, so they passed that act, and for many years, going back into the early 30s, people didn't have to pay taxes every time they got paid. They paid their income tax at the end of the year. And many people had problems doing that. Many people wanted to hold on to their money. And there were other things in the U.S. Constitution that provided for how you would be taxed. And there was many arguments that the income tax was constitutionally illegal. I don't want to get into that today, but it might be an interesting discussion for another day, especially those of you who are older than me and have a better memory. So in 1938, there was a man in Congress. His name was Rummel, R-U-M-L, Beardsley Rummel. And Beardsley said, listen, because people are having so much problem paying this income tax at the end of the year, they never set the money aside. They just spend it. And then at the end of the year, they don't have the money to pay their taxes. So why don't we do this? Whenever somebody gets paid at the employer, then the employer will deduct the taxes and send it to the feds, federal government, every month. And it passed. This was a great idea. It would make it easier for people to pay their taxes, and then they would never be delinquent. But the other thing that happened was it didn't seem like so much money if you paid it every month. What happened then? Well, I'll tell you. They started raising taxes again. And it had, in some cases, really gotten out of hand. And as far as I'm concerned, it's still out of hand. Matter of fact, they started using the income tax as a method of creating social change, managing the way you and I look at our social existence. And it has its ups and downs. There was also a man who was what's the word I'm looking for? He was a economist, and he had some ideas about what to do when the economy slowed down and how to get it back running again. And his idea was, if the economy starts slowing down and people are getting out of work, the government should spend more money to improve their lot in life until they could go back to work, which would be when the economy strengthened again. That was Maynard Keynes, by the way. That was his name. And his idea was not a bad idea. But the part that was missing in the equation is when the economy came roaring back again, let's use that term for lack of a better one, what they should do is pay off the money they borrowed to stimulate the economy. But that's not what happened. Because now they had raised the spending, Congress could raise spending limits. Even now, Congress is discussing, well, let me rephrase that. The Democrats want to raise the limit on how much money the government can spend. Now, that's all well and good. But you have a budget at your household. I have a budget at mine. And sometimes we need to think about how much money will we spend this year? What do we have available to do what we need to do? And if we don't have it, can we get money someplace else? Can we do more work? We get a better job? I mean, those kinds of questions come up. Can we get a better deal on what we're going to do? So what happens is that the government doesn't have to do that. When they created the income tax, they also created a thing called the Federal Reserve. And I will admit my lack of understanding on that particular item until the age of 40. You know, I would see them talk about the Fed in the news. Well, I always thought about the federal government when they said the Fed. I didn't realize that there was a thing called the Federal Reserve Bank. And the Federal Reserve Bank has many functions. Matter of fact, if you were to go on YouTube and look at some short videos about how money works through the Fed, how the U.S. Treasury set this up, and why you're so confused about your money, sure you are. As a matter of fact, let me tell you what. You remember, I have something in front of me here from 2018. And I got this from the from the IRS. And everybody knows how much we love the IRS. They're one of the more favored government institutions. And it said here, if you do not receive public assistance and you do not owe taxes on your Social Security benefits, you may ignore this form. And I didn't. I mean, I didn't ignore it, but I didn't owe the taxes either because I had reduced my income substantially. But there was a thing in this form that I came across, and people used to always talk about the income tax was voluntary. And a lot of people would say, oh, sure, yeah, that's right. Don't pay your income taxes and see what happens. But here it was in the third column on this page, and it was box 6. There were 6 boxes to answer questions. And it said, voluntary federal income tax withheld. And it goes on to say, that shows the total amount of benefits you voluntarily withheld and paid for federal income tax. No wonder people think it's voluntary. And everyone is always afraid that if you didn't pay your taxes, you could go to jail. There was actually a congressman, his last name was Traficant. And Congressman Traficant disagreed with the IRS and the income tax. And so they sent him to jail. Now, I have always been told that we don't have a debtor's prison in this country. England had one. If you didn't pay your bills, you went to prison. So we don't have one in this country, but if you don't pay a tax, you go to jail. If they found out you stole money, you go to jail because you can't pay it back. If you have a traffic ticket and you can't pay it, the process seems to be that you could go to jail for failure to pay the traffic ticket. And a traffic ticket these days is no small sum. So this is all about money and how things work. And I do believe, as you're my listening audience, I would hope that you would want to understand how money works. Now, it went on to say in this form, this was notice 703, by the way, in case you're ever interested in it. And the form, this IRS form, was SSA. That's two S's as in Sam, and A as in Albert, dash 1099 dash Sam Mary, SM. You might look it up. The catalog number for this form is 61879N. And if you didn't get all of that information, stop by our booth, the 98.1 FM KPFV booth at the Fall Festival when I am there, and I will be more than happy to take your name and send you a copy of what I'm looking at. By the way, there was a man named Irwin Schiff, and maybe you don't know who Irwin Schiff was, especially if you're young. Matter of fact, if you're young, you probably don't know much of anything other than what you learned since you were born. But us older timers, we have learned things that we like to share. And Irwin Schiff is one of those things I like to share. In fact, Irwin Schiff was one of my information heroes. You know, some people like to read the law and like to read the rules and regulations. And sometimes those rules and regulations are really, really long and hard to understand. They're written that way for a reason. Irwin Schiff had an office on Sahara Boulevard in Las Vegas. And he had a big sign out in front of his business stating that he did not believe you had to pay income tax, that it was a fraud on the American people. And he actually wrote a couple of books about it. One of them was called The Federal Mafia. Now, he wasn't saying that the mafia was running the government. He just said they were acting like it. Evidently, that was a crime to say anything bad about the IRS, the Federal Reserve, and how the government managed to seize your money. But in some cases here, he was right on target. There have been people in this country who have had their lives destroyed, some who have committed suicide over the stress created by the IRS and their collection activities. You know, there's an IRS police force. Well, they must be some of the nicest people in the world if they want to protect us from the evil invaders. That's not the case, folks. There is a debtor's prison in this country. And I don't believe that anyone should ever go to prison for failure to pay taxes. As a matter of fact, maybe the tax laws ought to be revised to more correctly reflect today's modern lifestyle. You know, all of us are citizens of the United States, have rights guaranteed to us by the U.S. Constitution. Ignoring the Bill of Rights for the time being, the U.S. Constitution was written by men. I'm sure there were some wives and women involved, but mostly the signers are men. And I think their understanding of human nature is what caused the way the Constitution was written. And if you don't have a copy of the Pocket Constitution, you should get one. Or you should go online and download your own personal copy. I have several. And start getting to understand what your powers are as a citizen. Now, I started talking about money, but everything relates back to money. Whatever it is. And maybe in a little bit, we'll talk about this thing down on the border with people coming in to this country by the thousands every day. But before we get to that, we really do need to look at the U.S. Constitution. And I'm not going to take you through it, but you should read it. There's stuff in there. Here's how it works, folks. There was a survey done in New York a long time ago asking the people on the street what the purpose of the Constitution was. And the government. And people responded with, the government is there to tell us what to do. Seems to be working out that way. But it goes beyond that. The Constitution declared that every human being, it referred to men at the time because it was simpler to do that rather than all the BS you get today. But it stated in there that all of us essentially are sovereign citizens. We are the power. Everything that goes on in our country is because we, as the citizens, allow it. Not the immigrants, not the illegal aliens, not any particular race or color of person. It's we, the citizens. It doesn't say that, it says we, the people. But we, the people, are the citizens of this country. And in there are things that talk about how to conduct the government. Now, you may think, well, the government has rules to play by, but that's not really the whole thing. If you are a sovereign, that means that you have all the rights the Creator gave you, and it states that. And if you have all the rights because you were born under the Creator, in order for us to live more peacefully, we are willing to give up some of our God-given rights so that we can do that. So we create a government and we release some of those rights to the government to help manage our affairs so we can all live in harmony. And there are some things that happen. For instance, there's commerce between the states is regulated by the federal government because it goes from state to state. But a lot of the things that are regulated for you and me are things that are done by the state of either Nevada or California. Yes, I mentioned California, but God help those poor people. They have no idea what they're in for. So you have given up your rights to the state of Nevada in order to live a more harmonious relationship with your fellow human beings. Now, the state of Nevada has to deal with 49 other states. In the beginning, it wasn't 49. It was only 13 colonies became states. But they all had to learn how to cooperate with each other. No sense having a war between the states. Oh, yeah, that did happen, but that's a long time after. So this is a problem. So they created a federal government to oversee the entire country. Now, that didn't give the federal government powers that the state gave up some of its power to the Fed, but they kept all the others. And we, as the average citizens, kept more of those rights than the state had. Now, maybe you haven't thought about that much, but if you look at what's going on in the world today, right here in Nye County, right here in the state of Nevada, and because of that, from the federal government, Your freedoms are being attacked every single day. The government is going to raise taxes. Oh, they're giving you money now, but let me tell you what, somebody's got to pay that back because that money did not come out of thin air. Well, maybe I should rephrase that. That money came out of thin air, but they had to borrow it. And the reality of that is that if you borrow money, you'll have to pay it back. In your household, what happens is that little by little, you borrow more money on your credit card. God knows how many credit card offers I get every week. Don't want them. And the real bottom line of this whole thing is that that money in your pocket is not your money. I can't say that enough. If you take that money out of your pocket, it belongs to somebody else. Well, who the hell owns that money, you might ask? I think that's a damn good question. I mean, you have it in your pocket. You can keep it. That money is what's known as legal tender. You can pay your taxes with it. Actually, at one point, I created Andy Bucks. That's a whole nother story. That's when California was issuing IOUs because there wasn't enough money in California to pay people who worked for the government or were contractors. So the state of California was issuing IOUs. And what happened was that if you wanted to pay your taxes to the state of California, they would not accept the very IOU they gave you. Which kind of brings me to a little thing I got going on with US Bank and all the other banks in town. Something has happened in the banking industry, and I'm not quite clear what it is. But here's what happened to us. We had an account at US Bank. And one day, US Bank got a wild hair and decided they wanted to shed some of their accounts. So there were several organizations in town that received a notice from the bank saying that we're canceling your checking account and we'll have a check ready for you on such and such a day. No other explanation, but it says in their terms and conditions, I went back and read them, that either party can cancel the account at will. Okay, so I was chairman of the Independent American Party, still am, and we had some money, and it was in the bank, and I went down to collect the check, and they asked me, how do you want me to make the check out? And I said, well, we're the Independent American Party of Nye County, so make it out to the IAPNC. We'll just go, I'll go another bank. Now that was 11 months ago. I still have been unable to cash that check. What would happen if that happened with the money in your pocket, the legal tender? I'll tell you, I have gone to banks and I've talked to the managers of the banks, two of them, who have talked to their legal department. And for whatever it's worth, we've come across a stumbling block where I can't even go back to the original bank that wrote the cashier's check and ask them to return the check and just either cash it out or write the check out in my name. They said, we can't do that. You have to have a business. I said, but we're not a business. We're a political party. We don't care. You have to have a business. And that was just in the last week. It's been going on for quite a while. I've talked with the Secretary of State. Nobody understands. So that money is sitting in the bank. They're probably investing it. Certainly not paying me any interest, or not me, but the political party. And all of this is about the money. What are you going to do if the government comes and says, we want your money? Did that ever happen? Yeah, it did. I don't know if you ever saw the original money between 1930, before 1934, but the bills were bigger. When the new dollar bills came out, they were smaller than the old ones. So you could easily tell them apart. What if that happens again? You know, the economy right now is hot, quote unquote. And I can understand why. If every human being in the country got the $2,000 check, it either went in the bank or they spent it, which would drive the economy. We shall see. And if you have an opinion about money, I'll be at the Fall Festival booth, and let me see what my schedule is here when I'm going to be there. Hold on one second here. I'm going to have it in a second. There we go. I'm going to be at the booth on Friday from 4 to 7 p.m. And then again, I'll be there on Saturday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And on Sunday, I'm going to be there at noon until I get tired. So those are the 3 days where I'm going to be at the Fall Festival. If you have anything you want to talk about, things you'd like to hear on the radio, I'm open for grabs for almost anything. So with that, let's go on to another topic. There's so many things we could talk about with money. And I used to think that money was just numbers. Just add the numbers up and there's your money. But I found out that it wasn't that way in the crash of 29, when the money collapsed, when the stock market collapsed, when people were, do you know in 1929, 30, 31, 32, did you know people were living on the street? Did you know that people had shelters? They had no place to go. They had no money, that the food lines were multiple city blocks long just to get something to eat, because people were in such dire straits. When they talked about people jumping out of windows at Wall Street and other buildings, there was some of that. I mean, they don't build buildings where you can open the windows anymore. So it's important to kind of understand the history of this stuff. And like I said, if you'd like me to talk more about some of the history of money, I'd be more than excited to do that. Okay. There's some things going on politically in the circles for politics, like the Nevada Republican and Democrat parties. The Republican Party has people in office that hold every office in Nye County. There are no Democrats in office in Nye County that I am aware of. They can't even put up a candidate. They can't even agree to have a conversation about looking for something that we could all cooperate on to make life better. I mean, I don't think I disagree with everything in the Democrat Party. I don't disagree with everything in the Republican Party, but I do disagree with some of the people that are holding office. Yeah, that's a problem. So at breakfast this morning, we had a conversation about this kind of stuff. And we got into the idea of when people make promises that they know they can't keep and they're running for office. You know, let's say somebody's running for commissioner and they tell you what they want to do. And you vote for them because they told you they're going to do what they talked about. Now, what happens if they don't do it? Well, too bad. It was just campaign rhetoric and doesn't mean anything. But Nevada has a law. And in Nevada, verbal agreements matter. Now, when somebody's campaigning for office, I think everyone should ask that individual, are these campaign promises? because we look at it as your contract with we the people. Now, if we feel you are violating that contract, I would really like somebody, and it's not me anymore because it takes more money than this boy's got, or you could do it yourself. Go to court and file a complaint on the verbal contract that person made with you or with the public in general as to what they would do when they get elected. And I'm sure some of them will argue, well, things are different now. And you need to say, well, how are they different? Explain it to me, Lucy. We need to figure this out, folks. And I've always wanted to go to court to challenge somebody who reneges on their campaign promises. I mean, let's be realistic here. Let's say somebody, and elections are coming up next year here in the country. And let's say somebody's running for the House of Representatives. Now, House of Representatives has to run for office every 2 years. They hold office on 2-year cycle. Everybody, there's no 10% this year, 10% next year. Every 2 years, they have to run for office. So the entire House of Representatives has to run for office every 2 years. So let's say we have somebody comes to us in Nye County, and they're promising that they're going to help Nye County build better businesses. They're going to bring some light industry into town because light industry is how you generate wealth. And let's say they go to Washington and that doesn't happen. So let's be realistic here. There's 435 people in the House of Representatives. We're going to send one person, one soul, if you will, to the House of Representatives. Their name will not be Ocasio-Cortez. I don't know what it'll be. But that woman knew how to make waves. And she created the Squad. Can you believe that? The Squad. This was a group. Do you know when we send somebody to Washington, that there are people in Washington who have formed organizations to fight the person you sent to Washington to make your life better, to protect your sovereignty? The Black Caucus, the African American Caucus, the Spanish Caucus, the Chinese Caucus, the Asian Caucus. Where's the White Caucus? I don't hear anybody ever say that. So I want to say to the only man we have in Washington, not from our district, but he is the Caucasian, Mark Amadei, why don't you start a White Caucus? Let's see how far that goes. I bet you get lambasted to beat the band. Something is wrong with that picture. Can't we all get along? Can't we all decide that there are some things that we could all work to make life better? Let's not always go to war. In my opinion, all the money that's been spent on war, we don't have to have poverty anywhere. And don't tell me somebody's got poverty when they've got a computer, a cell phone, a TV set, and food on the table and a place to live. Maybe they don't live as good as some other people, and that's how life is. Maybe they don't want to. And maybe there are some people who are mentally ill who should be getting some help. I'm up for that. Don't put them out in the street, which is what they did a number of years ago. If you're too young to know about this, people that were in mental institutions were set loose on the streets because, I guess because basically they didn't want to house them anymore. It was too much trouble. And you'll see them. And all that business I was telling you about people living in the street during the Depression, all you got to do is look at Orange County, look at San Francisco, look at lots of places in this country where people no longer have a place with a roof over their heads. They're living in a cardboard box. They're living in a shanty. That happened during the Depression as well, in the 30s. It was even worse than that. There are World War I veterans who were promised a bonus for their service. And they had gone to Washington to declare their right to that bonus. And thanks to the goodness of Dwight D. Eisenhower, a couple of other generals, they burned them out. Their little shanty town in Washington, they burned them out and told them, get lost. You served your country. I don't care if you don't have legs anymore. Get out. And today, you know, your government attitude is kind of like that. Oh, they say they want to do something for you, but they're telling you what you will do. Which brings us to this old issue about the Constitution again. If your government can mandate everything you have to do, as an example, you will get a shot for COVID, and we will keep a record of it at the halls of government. And if you didn't get it, we will know that. And we will issue a certificate to those who did get the shot. And if you didn't get it, there will be things you can no longer do. In effect, you will be ostracized from part of society. Now, there's a law out there called HIPAA, H-I-P-P-A, which means that your medical history is private. And yet government now has it. And they have more and more of it. And if they find that you did not get the shot or the booster shot or whatever they want to give you, you can't get on an airplane. You can't go to events. This is not the freedom and liberty that you were guaranteed under the Constitution as it was written. And it's not a joking matter. Wait till they come. One of my neighbors, when I lived in Placentia, California, and you can check it out, I lived at 407 Arapahoe Place in Placentia, California, from 1973 until 1980. My next door neighbor's wife escaped from Cuba when Castro took over, when the communists took over Cuba. They had a dictator there before that. I don't have no opinion about him. But she escaped from Cuba. There were people all the time escaping from Cuba because that's not a great place to be. Haiti must not be a great place. All these people on the border these days. Evidently, the place that they're at is not like the United States. And you know what? I'm a little disappointed in this country. I'm disappointed in the people that all of you have voted to go into office. And I'm referring to the Democrats because they have the majority of votes in the state of Nevada. You should be ashamed of yourselves. The people you have elected into the government are turning this country upside down. Don't blame them. I blame you, the Democrat voters, and the Republican rhinos who voted those people in. Oh, they didn't like Donald Trump. Yeah. But what you see going on today didn't happen during the Trump administration. That man did some good things. And I'm not even in his political party. And Donald, the Donald, if you will, did some amazing stuff. He got the Arabs to talk and make arrangements where they're doing business with Israel. Can you believe that? He did an end run around Palestine so that the Arabs and Israel could coexist. Now, if Palestine wanted to negotiate with Israel and keep their part of the bargain, I'm sure that would work, but not under this current administration. And look at your border. If you're seeing the pictures on television of what the border's like, I'm surprised that there hasn't been an epidemic of some kind with all those people, 12,000, 15,000 people, poor sanitation. God knows what goes on down there. I have a suggestion for all the people who are having to deal with this border situation where the Democrats have just walked away from it and tell us nothing's wrong, everything's okay. But when they ask this Democrat president, what are you going to do about the border? He says, we're going to fix it. You're right. And he walks away from you. You kind of got the over-the-shoulder answer. So I think the Border Patrol should just go on vacation, or they should be sick. And even more important, maybe they should all turn in their resignation, every one of them. And we should pay them a bonus for doing that, because now it'll be up to the President of the United States to protect our border. I saw a thing on TV today, and it was about some of the Haitians that were sent back to Haiti. And when they got there, it turned out they didn't live in Haiti. They had identities from other countries. And they were angry that they were sent back to Haiti because they claimed that's where they were from. You can't make this stuff up. This thing about Irwin Schiff and his thing with the income tax and the Federal Reserve not being the federal government. I didn't think you could use the word federal without permission from the federal government, but that's just me. I don't know. So let's go on to some other thing that I have here. And we do a breakfast every Thursday morning at the museum, and it goes on before it's open. And I'm not a hoarder, well, some people would think I am, but I like to save stuff. And I save stuff so I can go back and look at it later. So, and sometimes what's written on the things we save, we really didn't understand what we were being told. I'll give you an example. This was from January 2003. Now, I was living here in 2003, and I had a copy of the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy for Esmeralda and Nye County. And there's a lot of pages to this thing. I want to see exactly how many here. Oh boy. I bet if they would just numbered the pages, it would be easier to find what you're looking for. Okay, here we go. 59 pages. It's called the CEDS document, CEDS, which stands for Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. And it was a partnership between Nye County and Esmeralda County. And it had great stuff in there. I mean, skill training and career development for the county, industrial attraction. Let's see, on page 43, that's where you find industrial attraction. Well, I'm going to go to page 43. Hopefully the numbers are, yeah, there are the numbers. Okay. Here we are, page 43. And there's a map, and it talks about tourism market areas. I'm sorry, the index said it was industrial attraction. So maybe I should go to page 45. Okay, here we go. Technology Corridor Program Development. And what they were going to do was to analyze market options for high bandwidth enabled businesses as a portion of the diversification of the regional marketplace in partnership with existing carriers. I'm sorry. I would like to see something specific. They wanted to integrate asset into the region's business retention expansion program. I would have liked to have seen them identify some of that in this package. They want to identify key waste management and alternative energy development technology. Okay, that's good. That was it. So what did they do? As a result of the comprehensive economic development strategy, they purchased, I believe it was 80 acres out in Amargosa, an area called Lathrop Wells, which is along Highway 95. And there's a little business there. There's like a place to eat and a little casino play, and not too much else. And they developed this thing called the Science and Technology Center. The idea was that there's Yucca Mountain. They're going to store uranium there. We should have a university. We should attract companies that deal in science and new technology. And it would all develop because this is the coming thing. Oh, by the way, and also there's an airport in Amargosa. It was referred to by name and used to be on the maps for pilots, known as the Jackass Flats Airport. It had a 5,200-foot runway. That's a mile. That's a long runway. They actually had a 727 land there once. They used to do touch and goes for the military, like with C-130s and things like that. And it was owned, and that airport was leased from the Bureau of Land Management, one of my favorite government entities, by a company out of Arizona called Harris Farms. And they were leasing it for a pittance. It was like less than $400 a year. And it was a 20-year lease. So they had time to kind of develop and grow. So there's actually a runway, a taxiway. There was a building. There was a cover where you could put your airplane. There was actually a metal building where you could conduct business and do some maintenance work. And I have those documents. It was given to me by a lady named Mrs. Crooks, because her father ran the airport. Now, in 2005, with the Science and Technology Center being purchased, Yucca Mountain being in full exposure and hopefully being developed, and this airport being right there so people could fly in and out, Joni Eastley single-handedly, who was a commissioner at the time, destroyed the money for the airport in Amargosa. She wanted it to be the airport in Beatty. There was already an airport there. I have pictures. There were 3 of us that went out there to look at it. It was there. But at the time we looked at it, it was a compact dirt runway. Looked like it had blacktop at one time, which without use, it kind of deteriorated. So there it was. So maybe somebody should ask this current commissioners, what are we doing with the Science and Technology Center that we spent $3 million to set up? Just to buy it. I mean, the SEDS documents must say something about it. And if we're going to spend money talking about science and technology, it's not just about solar panels, although we may be surprised. Maybe solar panels will go away and something else will take its place. That's what I'm holding out for. So anyway, we talked about this document. And if you go online on the county website, I'm sure, and you type in Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, you'll find it. And if you can't, you let me know. I'll find it for you. It's there. They did the same thing. That's one study. Here's another study. This one had to do with water. We've been studying water ever since Tim Hafen and the Bowmans and whoever else had a farm here. And it's interesting to talk to the people who were alive when those farms existed. And one of those people is Charles Nyberg. Charles Nyberg was a well driller. And there was a time as he got older that he sold his well drilling business to Jim Pike, who still owns a well drilling business. And there were some other well drillers in town. And I'm mentioning this because the county, Nye County, had hired a hydrologist, an expert in water, to do a Nye County water resources plan. And it was developed in 2002, it was published. I have a copy. I actually have 2 copies of that study. And after the study came out, Tim Hafen would have some ad hoc meetings to look at geology and where's the water come from and what's the recharge rate and all those things that we talk about. So this study that Tom Bucco did, by the way, we paid close to $600,000. Originally less than that for the first study, then the update, but at least that amount of money on the study of water here in Nye County. And actually, when Tom Bucco died, his wife, I guess she was his wife, took over the business and was paid $80,000 to do an update on the study. I don't have a copy of that, folks. I'm not interested in it. I think Tom's original study still applies. And the goals were to use it as a tool to help guide the development, management, and use of the county's water resources. The plan set forth the goals and guidelines for planning. It defines the water resources we have and issues related to those resources, and it provides specific alternatives and recommendations for the long term, meaning the 50-year term, management of the water resources. And the plan was developed in cooperation with the Nevada Division of Water Planning and the Nevada Division of Water Resources. Now, Nevada has a guy who's like a god. And that god is the water czar. Whatever he says goes. And there's a long story about the history of what's going on. And it does deserve to have a discussion. And it needs to have a roundtable discussion on the radio with people who have knowledge about what's going on with your water. Oh, and you may say something to the effect of, well, I don't care what's going on with the water. I got a well. And the other argument is, well, I'm not on a well. It doesn't make any difference to me. But I'll tell you, every drop of water used in Nye County, in Pahrump especially, comes from a well. If you're with a water utility, they have wells taking water out of the ground and redistributing it and charging you to do that. So everybody is getting water from a well. And you won't give a damn until you find out that you had to deepen your well and deepen the height, the depth of your pump, because the water level has dropped in your area. Right here at this radio station, that has occurred. And you know what the funny thing about that is? You won't think that the water level is a problem. You're going to blame it on the electric company. And here's the way that works. Typically, you're getting an electric bill, maybe $100, $150. You're really careful with your water. And then one month you get a bill and all of a sudden it's $430 or more. And you say, wait a minute, I haven't changed anything. I'm still using electricity like I used to use it. I've checked my refrigerator, I've checked my heat pump, my air conditioning, everything is the same. How can it be the electric company is doing this to me? How dare they do that? So they call the electric company and complain. And the electric company has no choice but to investigate, and they'll come back and tell you, we don't see anything wrong with your meter or with the electricity we're supplying. It's something at your house. And that's when somebody tells me that this is happening to them. And what I say is, why don't you call a well driller out to check your well? And guess what? That's going to be it. And what's happening is the water level still may be above the pump that you have, but when the pump starts to run and they get what they call drawdown, the amount of water coming into the area where the well is and the amount you're pulling out, there's a disparity. Not enough coming in to supply the pump's demand and capacity to deliver. And you may not even be aware of it until you get that electric bill. Now, I tell you what, it's not the only place I know about where this happened. Happened to our daughter over on Fremont Street. Yep. So just because you got a well, or somebody else thinks they don't have a well, sooner or later, everybody's got a well. And the question has become, and this came up at breakfast again, well, if we're concerned about how much water we have, shouldn't we do something to limit population growth? Because every straw that goes in the ground is an increase in drain on our water supply. And then you have to go back and look at Tom Bucco's 2002 hydrology report. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do a damn thing, you know. Just keep watering that lawn in the middle of the day because it's so hot. Just put in high water usage plants around your house. That's okay. But I don't want to be the one responsible if it happens to us like it happened in Arizona and happened in California. You know, Arizona had an aquifer that went dry. They've written laws to try and fix that. California hasn't written laws to do that. They just pack up bottled water or a tanker truck and deliver water to the homes so they can cook and eat. But no mistake about it, the water levels are not what you think they are. And things are happening. Tom Bucco was right. And when your commissioners tell you they think the population here in Pahrump would be 80 to 100,000, there's only one way that's going to happen. Well, I shouldn't say only one way. The first way is they're going to restrict your water usage. They're already making attempts to do that. Not only are they going to restrict your water usage, you're going to have to pay more because that's one way of restricting how much you use. That garden you'd like to have? Maybe not. The other thing that has to do with water usage is how many people actually should be living in Pahrump to maintain the current lifestyle. There is an answer to that. Look at Boulder City, which is near Hoover Dam. They have a limitation on how many houses can be built every year. These days, that number is 120. Now, you'll hear from people that will say, well, the government can't tell somebody what to do with their land. Really? Well, how is it that Boulder has a limit on how many houses that can be built? Boy, we'd have to have a long conversation about this. But don't you believe the government can't determine that? You've got to go to planning to get the approval or you can't build. There you go. There's the solution. All right. We're getting to the end of the show here. And this is Andy Alberti, 98.1 FM. Tune in to me every Thursday at 5 p.m. And we also replay now at 5 p.m. on Saturday as well. Saturday is all talk shows interspersed with music. So with that, I have enjoyed being on the show and giving you information maybe you didn't know. And if you did, we can have another conversation another day. So with that, This happy camper is out of here, and I'll see you at the Fall Festival.